Do like she make it through? All right, good. Because when I ask her, how'd you do, she'll say, not very good. She always says that, but anyway. You know, I left my water over there. Yeah, I'll go with that one. It's fine. All right, when Robin gets back, we will get started. And you might be kind enough to give me a couple extra minutes, but we won't go a lot of extra minutes. We can bear with it. So, Arkansas have a good basketball team this year, or can we tell yet? No. Well, my basketball team is my coach's last year. Okay. You should get in a piece of paper with a lot of circles, okay? Yeah, we're not. This is not a game to play. This is actually notes for today. All right. I haven't really titled this session because I don't know exactly what to title it. But this is a tool actually that we use a lot with couples. And I use a lot with men, and it does make sense, believe it or not, if you'll bear with me. I could say this would be a session on how to protect your marriage from adultery. If you Google, which is a fantastic thing. I don't know if it's always true, but I do a lot of work through that and other such things as far as when I get on a topic. You'll come up with a lot of statistics. We know that a new trend in marriage the last several years has been that older marriages, if they ever get that far, 20, 30, 40 years, getting divorces. Crazy. Who was it, Bill? Somebody we knew?
In our church.
Yeah, 50 years. We had one couple, 50 years of marriage, and he's reconnected with a girl in high school on Facebook and decided to go to Florida and leave the marriage. Like crazy. But this would be for all the men and all the ladies, because also statistics show that whatever you can make statistics say whatever you want them to, but probably honestly, in most American marriages, the men, about 40-something%, most of them will say will have an extramarital affair during their marriage. About 27% of women will have an affair. Those are statistics, and you say, where you get those? Just go Google, and you'll come up some higher and some lower, but that's kind of the middle ones that I've found. So this is kind of help you prevent that, help you prevent other things. The men last session with me, I revealed some deep sickness in my heart and life, and this chart came as a result of that as I finally dealt with issues in my life, okay? So let's go back.
Can I fix your mic?
You may do anything you want. You can,
I know. I think I had it all wrong.
well, it's like, you know what,
Take it
it's
off.
like what Adam said. Messed it up, so it's like Adam said that. How's that? That better? Okay. All right. So on your left side of your notes there, you see 4 blanks, and I titled that What We Lost at the Fall. Okay, so I'll pause real quickly. Everybody understand the fall? Everybody just nod. Everybody understands. It's when Adam and Eve sinned and human race fell, which has affected all of us from that day on. We've all had that impact. So what did we lose? When Adam and Eve, when they chose that day to disobey God, what did they lose? Number one, they lost a relationship with God. It was broken. And from that day on, God has to come chasing after us. You know, we say, well, I found God. No, he found you. You didn't find him. He found you. Because God, this God that we know, when we fell, from that day on, he provided covering. He provided a way out for us. But that was broken, that relationship with God. It causes the rest of our problems. Second thing that was broken or lost that day was interpersonal relationships. Interpersonal relationships. Okay? Prior to that day, Adam and Eve woke up and had fun every day. Running around naked, having a good time, never arguing. I mean, you know, never having a dispute. Everything was great. But after the fall, all of a sudden, that interpersonal relationship was scarred, and we started to see it come out. Accusations, that woman. And then she said, well, it's that snake, and all it goes. And that snake didn't know what to say, didn't have a leg to stand on, so consequently, you know, but interpersonal relationships. So what are we saying? From that day on, every human relationship is scarred, and it takes work. So we start with couples, say, hey, wake up. It takes work to be married. Why? Because of that Adamic sin, that nature we have, and that scar in our relationship. Every relationship is going to take work. Every relationship, husband, wife, child and parent. You know, oh, she's so precious. Well, wait till they get 13, tell me that. All right? Now we have issues, don't we? We have to work on that. Friends have problems. Every human relationship, interpersonal relationship, was scarred from that day on. Third, nature. Nature changed, remember? Adam and Eve, prior to that, God told them, say, hey, Adam, this is your garden. Do whatever you want. You know, name all the animals. So they came by and, you know, this is it. Go out, pick fruit. It's going to be there, etc. Well, that day, I imagine it went out after that, and Adam went out and came back that afternoon from his day in the garden, and Eve looks at him and said, what in the world has happened to you? Sweat was pouring off his brow. He'd never experienced that before. Hands were bloody because there was thistles and thorns. You remember the story? And you will work by the sweat of your brow. He'd never experienced that before. And he came home that day. Now nature has changed. And he said to Eve, I don't know if I'm going to make it. I don't know if I'm going to get through, man. It's never been like this before. Okay? And most men come home throughout their careers wondering, I wonder if I'm going to make it. I wonder if I'm going to get through. Because of nature. And nature groans. Remember, Romans says it groans and it waits for the day that God restores this world back to its original where he had it. And it's nature's. And so that makes what? That makes work more difficult. That makes work a challenge every day for all of us. And because it becomes a challenge and it works, and we go back to our priorities, then what do? We start to make it a higher priority. It becomes our God. And because nature, the very existence of this world has changed. Fourth, and this is the one that took me 46 years to learn, our self-identity changed. Remember, before that day, everything in their life revolved around God. Remember? I mean, the relationship, talk with God, walk with God, everything. They were totally complete. They were totally at ease with themselves. But from that day, they didn't know who they were. We call it self-identity. We call it like, who am I? That's the question we ask. Who am I? Why am I here? And so, when we don't know the proper answer to that, we let the world tell us who you are. You remember that little quiz we did at the beginning, the boundaries, the marks? And because of shortness of time, I didn't explain that totally how I was going to use it. But here's the addition to that is that if we don't understand and we don't put those marks up, so we have a guideline, which is the Word of God. If we don't understand this is our rule and we don't put that up, guess what? Everybody else is going to tell you what the rule of life is. Your boss will tell you what your life is. Everybody will tell you what your purpose is. Everybody tell you who you are. And so if we listen to a lot of outside voices, and they're coming at us more than ever, media, social media, everything, television, telling us who we are, what we should be, et cetera, et cetera. Your kids, grandkids, they're growing up with that, trying to figure out who am I, and now who am I? Am I a boy or am I a girl? Why? Because someone's telling them that. You know, it's coming these voices. They're hearing this saying, this is what you should be. And now it's penetrating so much. Last night we got to the hotel, and my wife turned to what she turns to so many times. Hallmark. I say, honey, I can write the story, you know. I know how it's going to end. If they're up there in the snow village and, all this, and there's going to be tension, they're not going to, they walk apart. It's not going to happen. Then right at the very end, it happens. And last night, we're watching that, and I know how it's going to happen. I said, we're about 5 minutes to the end, aren't we? Or she said, we're 5 minutes to the end. I said, yeah, okay, I know. And then, the couple kisses, and it's all right, and they're all standing by the Christmas tree, and all these people around the Christmas tree. And then guess what? Ruined the whole picture. Two guys are standing there, and they reach over and hold each other's hands. HGTV is now becoming, I call it the home gay network. Because if you're watching the shows now, they just keep slipping it in, slipping it in, slipping it in. And you think, that's the one you shouldn't, but that's the one, but all, women like it always has a happy ending. Self-identity, who we are, it's coming so much around us, and it slips in. Your kids, your grandkids, and I, not even around all those, couldn't figure out who I was till our 28th year of marriage. And I told the guys about it, and you say, well, what was it? Well, talk to your husband. That way it could save us some time. They'll tell you what about. But my self-identity, theologically, was in Christ, but in my emotion and my heart, it never was. My identity was in something else, performance. Because why? That was broken way back there in the fall. Everybody with me? I can expand that for a long time, but our time won't allow us. I want to just keep working here. All right, so with that set as the background, relationship with God's broken. In a relationship with each other, relationship with nature and our work is broken. Our relationship with ourself. We're still people asking at 40, 50 years old, who am I? You go to college in your philosophy class, you look at your navel and they tell you, who am I? And you're trying to think who you are. You're trying to figure it out in college and on. So this is all set now to the background to most of our problems, okay? Now, I fully understand more than ever in my life mental health. Okay? It's a reality. Back when I was growing up in church, everything's a spiritual problem. No, there are more than spiritual problems. Okay? And I'm not here to go off on, that, but I just want you to know that there are. So what I'm going to give you is a model, not of what we would call a clinical model, what we call a medical model of mental health, because that's a reality. But I'm going to give you a model of what really takes place apart from that. Apart from the chemistry, my son went through that. My daughter battles with that. But we're just talking about if there's not that clinical medical model behind, this model kind of explains why we get where we are in our marriages and every other arena. All right? So bear with me. This is what I discovered on my kind of own and listening and just putting this all together, that in ourselves, this first big ring around us is what I call the emotional part of our lives. All right? That's the emotional part of our lives, which controls a lot of our life, our emotions. You go to a therapist, and I haven't been to a lot of them, but I know a lot of them, and I use a lot of them in referrals. But you go there, and traditionally, many times you'll go in, you'll sit, and some of the first conversations will be this question: how do you what? How do you feel? Because they got to start with some layer. You know, they don't know you. They're trying to figure out, okay, what's your problem? So they'll start that conversation. How do you feel today? You know, what brings you to me? And they'll start many times with that emotional level. And the answers will come back something like this: I'm fearful. I'm angry. I feel guilty. I feel shame. I feel depressed. And they might give you a number of those answers, and I don't know if you can see them up there, and you could continue that list down, but that's, you know, what they might say to you. I'm very fearful, very angry. I just feel so guilty. Why? Because then, of course, they'll start asking why, won't they? Well, why do you feel that way? Now, my theory, and it could be proven wrong, but because it's my theory, it has to be right. That was a joke, okay? The next level down in our lives is what I call the volitional level of our lives. And that's down inside. Emotional, you can see, you can feel it, you can emote it, you can talk about it. But then the next level down is the volitional level. And that's the level of our heart, of our life, where down inside we make our choices, we make our decisions, and we call that the will. God's given us a will, free will, to make those choices, to make decisions in our life. And that's in that volitional level. Okay? Everybody with me? So my theory is that this emotional level that we have in our lives, fear, anger, whatever it might be, is a result of the second level of the choices we've made. You make bad choices, guess what? You're going to have bad results. You make wrong choices, you're going to have a list of negative results. If you make right choices, the results are going to be different. Instead of anger over here, you're going to have stuff like peace, joy, love, long-suffering, patience, kindness, goodness. And that's called what? The fruit of the Spirit. Why? Because in your heart, you have made choices that are godly, right, led by the Spirit, and you're going to have those emotions rather than these emotions. All right? That makes sense to me. I hope it does to you. That how we are emotionally is many times, unless we're in a clinical medical situation, chemistry messed up, that we have got these results because we have made the wrong choices. We are the result of our choices, our decisions. All right? Now we're going to go one more layer. And that other circle is what I call the rational layer of our lives. Okay? And you say, Dennis, what do you mean the rational layer? That's the layer of our beliefs and our thinking. And it's where we process. We think about things. I think there's a misspell there. A G should be out of there. But we think, and out of our thinking, we form a belief pattern. And in that belief pattern, we start to form images in our mind, what that's going to look like. Okay? Everybody with me? So, what am I saying? Our choices and our decisions that we make in our will are affected by our belief. What we believe, what we've been thinking about, forms an image in our mind many times, a picture of what it's going to look like. And that looking like then affects our choice. And if it's the right choice, great. If it's the wrong choice, we're going to be in deep trouble. We're going to feel badly, and there's going to be consequences to those wrong choices. Okay? Are we all together? So, this is going to sound crazy. I believe that we never make irrational choices. Huh? In your mind. In your mind, no, this is not irrational. In your mind, you've rationalized the choice. You've thought about it enough. You believe something. You've formed the image. No, this is this is the best thing. And so I make that choice, and then I'm going to have to live whatever that emotions or those consequences are, based upon what I believed. So we go back to the garden. When Adam and Eve, we don't know how that really took place. All the details, do we? We don't know if that was a one-day decision or months. We don't know how many times she came in contact with that, and whether it happened right then or the serpent came along and talked to her and she thought about it and she formed a belief pattern and then she made her decision. We don't know all of that, but I know the process was what? That when he came along, he gave her a lie. So in that other little blank there on your side, as it showed up, I hope, a lie. Her process became a lie. And she believed that. In Romans chapter 1, Paul gives a lengthy explanation of the human race. In Romans chapter 1, and he starts off earlier, and you got to remember, he's writing to the church at Rome, and he's writing from Corinth when he writes this letter. I don't know if he was looking out his apartment window and looking at that city, but if you know anything about Corinth, it was Las Vegas on steroids, okay? It was a sinful, totally depraved town. Prostitution at the temple. Remember the temple prostitutes, if you know the history. It was this full of gods and totally a society unhinged morally and everything else. And so he sits there, and he might be looking out there, and God inspires him to write, and he's probably seeing this, but he's writing the human race in Romans chapter 1. So in Romans chapter 1, we won't, because of our time limit, I won't read all of it, but let me just read to you a little of this and see if this makes sense. Paul's writing, and I'll start in verse 18. He sets it up a little earlier. But he writes along, and this is what he says. He says, "For the wrath of God," in verse 18, "is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness, they suppressed the truth. For what can be known about God," now he's just going to take one example about how we can know God, "is plain to them, because God has shown it to them, he has revealed it to them. For by his invisible attributes," the thing that, we can't see, the attributes of God, which are righteous, pure, holy. And you know the attributes of God. We can make a list of. We don't see them, we see them expressed. But he says those attributes, namely, and he pulls out one of them, his eternal power and his divine nature. He said that has been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world and the things that have been made. So what's he saying here? He says from the beginning of creation, we can understand there had to be a God to make all of this. The creation itself was evidence of God. And man understood that. And they could see that. And now he keeps writing. Until he says, ever since the beginning of the world, in the things that have been made. So, he says, they are without excuse. Verse 21. For although they knew God, they did not honor him. Okay? In the Greek there, in the words that are used, though they were aware of God, they understood that there was a God. Now they had to make a choice. Am I going to honor that? Am I going to bow to that? Am I going to lift this God up? Okay? He says, though they knew that, they didn't honor God. They didn't honor him as God, or did they give thanks to him? He says, but they became futile in their thinking, and foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools, and they exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. Therefore, now, based upon all that, that's what the therefore is, God gave them up in their lust of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves. And because, and verse 25 is the clicker, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie. So when Paul looks at mankind, he said they've had this opportunity, but they wouldn't humble themselves, because that's the first step of coming to God, isn't it? God, I need you. I'm a sinner. And they wouldn't do that. And so then they formed their gods by images, created their gods. And the reason why, he says, is because they exchanged the truth for a lie. Every sin is based upon a lie. And every sin begins because we do not believe that God is good. That's what happened in the garden, right? Remember? He said, no. She said, we can eat of all the trees, but this one we can't. And God has told us or we would die. And when Satan comes along with a lie and says, no, you won't do that. You don't have to humble yourself and believe that. He says, no, if you take this fruit, you'll be like God. You'll be able to, you'll be just like that. You'll have all those things. And so instead of humbling and honor, they exchanged truth for lie. That's how the sin began. And now we're here thousands of years later, and all of it still begins with a lie. Now, on the other side, life. What we're really wanting, every human being wants to have life. And when we say that, not just the existence of our heart beating, but the existence in our lives of meaning and completeness and fulfillment and satisfaction. That's what we're trying to find. But as the old country song says, we're looking for it in all the wrong places. We want life, and Jesus came along and said what? He said, I give life, and I give it what? More abundantly. That's the truth. That is the truth. And if you follow the principles that I've given you to live by in this book, you'll find life. If you don't, you'll find death. Death to your dreams, death to your marriage, death to every relationship, death eternally, possibly. Okay? And yet Jesus has promised us life. And Satan gives us a lie. So let's go back to what I said a minute ago. And that is this, that we do not make irrational decisions. We think. But everybody else who's watching is thinking, well, that's the most irrational thing I've ever seen. Let me illustrate. Guy's married, has a wonderful wife, 2 precious kids. And he's worshiping his job, he's working hard, and he's forgetting his priorities, and he's forgetting the truth of his commitments, and job has moved in the first place, possibly, keeping his ego up, trying to keep himself looking good, trying to fight against nature. Am I going to make it? Trying to find his self-identity in his job. And so he's working hard, and he leaves home, and sometimes kids causes a lot of heartache and problem. But when he gets to work in a lie. Because everybody thinks he's great. He's the boss. Or he's the guy that works hard. And there's a little gal sitting there in the office that says something to him now and then. So, oh, wow. You work so hard, and he listens to that. The next thing you know, you're watching him, and you realize Oh, Bob's hanging around her desk a little more than he should be, I think. And not only is this talking, now you see him leaning over, talking a little closer. And then you see him in the lunchroom or at the water fountain. And you're sitting there as another man, pretty smart, and you're thinking what? That guy's getting ready to do something very stupid. And the next thing you know, you see him out to lunch somewhere by themselves. A little time later, not only you see him out to lunch, Bob has not gone to lunch. They've taken the afternoon off and gone to a hotel. And you've watched that develop, and as you watch it, you think this is the most irrational thing this guy's ever going to do. He has a wife at home who loves him. He has kids that are that adore him. And guess what? He's getting ready to destroy that whole thing and hurt them and hurt his marriage and hurt his relationship with God if he has one. And you're sitting there thinking, this is the stupidest thing he's ever done. Do you think Bob's thinking that? No. Oh, Bob is thinking, she understands. Yeah, I bet she's going to be a little more romantic than my wife. I left this morning, she had her hair in curlers, her flannel pajamas on, her flip-flops. I come home, and she's had a day. She didn't have her makeup on, and all of a sudden Satan starts putting lies in his mind, thinking this little gal is going to be better and make me happier than what I left at home this morning. And that lie develops, and he takes the bait, and he crosses the line and commits unfaithfulness. But I promise you, Bob wasn't thinking that way. He was thinking, this is good. Because why? Satan paints the picture really good. All right, one illustration, another one. I can give you illustrations all day how it works. I can illustrate it when women go shopping. How they fill up a credit card. And I can take any situation in our lives, and usually you're going to trace it back to a lie. And then rationally, in their mind, thinking and making these choices, and a belief that's formed this image that if I get this new dress, I'm really going to look better. And if I get this next new dress and this next one, and I get this thing, and I keep adding this to my house, where my house becomes my God, all of a sudden, her life gets out of hand. Joe works at the office, and you spend enough time talking to him over the months and years that you realize he's in debt up to his, he's spending MasterCard to pay for Visa card, Joe is in debt over his head. A few days later, Joe drives up in a new sports car. And you're thinking, what in the world? You can't even pay for that other car. What are you doing with that? And he drives up and he's that car and he says, man, how do you like my car? And you're thinking, what an idiot. Joe, don't you have a brain? You can't, you're so far in debt and you get a brand new car, $100,000 sports car or whatever it is nowadays. Do you think Joe's thinking, boy, I'm stupid? Man, I'm the dumbest guy in the world driving this sports car. Do you think that's what he's thinking? Heck no. He's processed it through, and he's got the loan, so it must be right. The car company gave him the loan for 70,000 months. Has to be the right thing. I got approved. Well, they'll approve anything, idiot. And he wasn't thinking that way. He was just thinking how good he'd look in that car and how it would build his ego. Because, you see, he had a faulty ego. He had a self-identity that was broken. And so to help that, he had to have more things. That's why he's so far in debt. And now this another thing to add to his stupidity. So he was not thinking, as he got that, signed that eternal note on that car, he wasn't thinking, I'm stupid. He'd already rationalized in his mind why he should have that car. And he believed in his mind this image. And he believed that image of what he was doing would give him life, fulfillment, satisfaction, meaning. Okay? Every sin is built on a lie And the lie is we don't believe that God is good and God is enough. And Satan adds to what we should have. We ready? Does that make sense so far? Am I just dreaming? Okay. Now, you say that's pretty simple. Yeah, there's a lot more complicated stuff. I realize that we make bad decisions. My daughter made bad decisions. Three marriages. 2 kids left behind. Struggling. And I didn't know. I thought it was sin. The action was sin, but hers was a lot deeper than that. And hers was a chemical imbalance that she didn't understand. We didn't understand for years. Okay. So there are other issues, but if those aren't the issues, it's because we're sinning, we're destroying marriages, we're looking across the yard, we're looking around the neighborhood, whatever it might be. We think that guy's going to love us better than our husband. All right? So what drives those things? Let's go down to that last circle. Way down inside of us, in the innermost being, there's a vacuum. When that fall came, a vacuum took place, and it was called needs. If you've taken Psychology 101, some of you remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Anybody remember the pyramid? Remember? You know, it starts down here, the basic needs of food and shelter and safety, and it keeps going up all the way up to self-actualization. Remember that one? I remember that in Psych 101, way back there, I don't know how many years ago, over 50 years ago in college. So I remember that. And those are all valid. I mean, those are truth. We do need those things, safety and food and meaning. But down inside, there's something that every one of us need. And it drives us, and it's longing. And we put it in 2 parts. On one side of those is, I would call it, significance. And on the other side, it is security. Okay? Significance is this. And if we could back that slide up one more time so they can see it a little better to that first one on significance. There you go. Respect for what I do. Respect me for what I do. And that's what significance is. I'm significant because I do something. Okay? Security, translated, is just love me for who I am. All right, remember back 2 hours ago, we read out of Ephesians, when Paul says, husbands, love your wives. Wives, at the very conclusion, in the last verse there in Ephesians, he says, so this is what I conclude. Husbands, love your wives. Wives, what? Respect your husbands. Why? Because those are the 2 greatest needs in our life. Now, we have both of those needs. Men want to be loved too. But the greater leaning of that is the woman wants to be secure. That's a basic need. Deep need in her life. And the man wants to be significant. Illustrate it. Guy's a businessman. He's traveling a lot. He's sitting at a bar at the airport, waiting on his flight, looking at the ball game. Another guy sits down. They're having a little drink together. They look over and introduce themselves. Hi, I'm Bob. Where are you from, Bob? I'm from Alabama. Where are you? Mississippi? Huh. What's the next question? What do you do? They don't say, hey, tell me about your family. You married? You got kids? No. We don't come to that. It's going to be later on if we get to that far. But the question that men will ask to each other is what? What do you do? Why? Because that's significant. Everything what we do is built around significance. If he says, you know what, I'm the head garbage man, and the other guy says, I'm a brain surgeon, all of a sudden significance finds its place. Because why? Faulty thinking, faulty system of identity. You know, I'd shared with the guys, my faulty sickness was, my identity was built in my performance. And so that significant layer was very high in my life, and I wanted you to know that. And so if a guy leaves home every morning, and his wife's just railed on him. She's just been a hag. And he leaves there feeling what? I'm not respected here. So what do? He'll substitute that. If he's respected in the softball league, he'll play softball 3 nights a week. Or, well, man, at work they respect me. So what? That's going to drive him to work longer and harder. His hobby gives him respect. The secretary gives him respect. And so he's going to start leaning that direction unconsciously, thinking patterns of, man, I'm somebody out here on the softball field. Still trying to grow up, And so he will lean for significance when there's a lack of respect somewhere else. And that's why Paul said what? Wives, do what? Respect your husband. Let him know what you do is so good, who you are, etc. It's the significance. The wife, if she doesn't feel loved, she's going to seek that security somewhere else. Sometimes it's kids. Her whole life involves around her kids. Good kids, she feels secure with them. You wonder why sometimes women just shop until they drop, and because they feel those things are going to make me feel secure. If I have enough of them, I feel secure. Okay? Love me for who I am. A wife wants to be loved for who she is. Period. For who she is. If she doesn't feel love for who she is, she's going to try to find something else. And so today, and I might walk off on some bad ground here. We have a world where women are doing everything they can to make themselves feel loved or whatever. We get it Botox, we get it, we do everything we can for that appearance because it makes us feel better that we feel, so we be loved. And it goes on and on and on. Love me for who I am. So this is what I say. A wife cannot compete with your job. Job's going to win every time. Wife cannot compete with your hobby. The hobby will win every time. The job will win. The hobby will win. The little gal will win every time. She cannot compete with that gal who's 20 years younger than she is at your work office. Just can't do it. She'll win every time if he's listening to a lie. Okay? And when a woman feels truly loved and secure, she could live in an outhouse. House is not going to make a difference to her. But if she has that lack there, then that house, I want more and more. Why? Because that lie that just makes me more secure will develop in her heart, and consequently, she'll believe a lie, and consequently, whatever it is, she can have the affair, she can oversaturate with kids, on and on it goes. But she's looking for one thing, I am loved. So that's why God said to the husband what? Husbands, what? Love your wives. As how? Christ loved the church. Sacrificially. Men, we talked a little about it over on the other side. How he loved the church sacrificially. He loved the church unconditionally. And when a woman feels that way, senses that, she becomes secure. Paul said that we exchange truth for a lie. And then he develops it, talks about the moral conditions of what he saw that day. And we look out here, and so when we deal with issues today, yes, I believe in the fallenness and the brokenness of man. Probably my view on some of the issues today in our culture could be a little different than they were years ago. A lot of things can happen. But most of the things that we see today is based on a lie. not the truth. And consequently, we see a society that thinks I need to be this way. And you know what? And I've studied all the issues of today quite a bit, whether it's, same-sex issues or whatever. And behind a majority of those is that something was broken back home, and they've been looking for someone to love them. And it was more comfortable to be loved by someone of the same sex than someone not. And on it goes. Yes, do I believe, and this is going to shock some of you, I believe that all was broken. Even the womb was broken. So the womb is not sacred in the sense that there's not an effect of Adam's sin there. I do believe in Psalms 139 that God created us and He knew every part of us. But they didn't guarantee that when we came out of that womb there wouldn't be brokenness, or I wouldn't have a Down syndrome grandson. Who the doctors asked my son and his wife, my daughter-in-law, after they ran all the tests during the pregnancy, and they sat in the office and said, "You're going to have a Down syndrome child." What was the next question he asked? "Would you like to end this pregnancy?" And they said, "No, no way." And now it's 6, going on 7? Which one? 7? Okay, can't keep up with them all. 7 years old, the joy of our life. Why would we want to end a life? Broken? Yeah. But that's a broken world we live in. And it doesn't change the fact that created in the image of God and loved by God. So we say, no way would we ever do that to any child that God has formed in a womb. So that's another track. But in the minutes I have, I just want to close out saying that a marriage is the most sacred thing we have. Satan is on a rampage to destroy your marriage. Period. At any age. You know, well, now we're married. So, no, at any time. And I realize I look around dealing with a little older crowd. If we were dealing with 20s and 30s, I'd really be pounding on a lot of stuff. But I just want to remind you, even at our age, if your mind's not centered on Christ, if you're not believing the truth that God created one man, one woman for all their lives, and that is the most experience, it's the greatest experience you can have to represent Jesus is in a marriage. If you don't believe that truth, you exchange that for anything else, at any age your marriage can be in danger, believe it or not. So we protect our marriages by knowing truth. We protect our marriages by walking in priority number 1, that priority of walking with God together, walking with God daily, each of us loving Him with all of our heart, with all of our soul, with all of our might, and so that what? We might love our neighbor as ourselves. And who's your closest neighbor? And I told the guys this last hour, someone you sleep with every night. That's your first neighbor. And I reminded them that's their first disciple. And that's the one that you have to love most of all, because as I told the men, I'm going to present this little blonde gal to Jesus someday. And I hope that I can present her faultless because of the blood of Jesus and because I have followed Him and been able to lead her to be the godly woman that she has developed. That's how God wants. Satan wants to destroy that. Don't listen to the lies. If you even start to hint, oh man, find help. Get help before He destroys the most precious testimony in your neighborhood, your marriage, and your home, okay? Now, I can pound on this forever, but you ready? I'm going to give you 3 homework assignments because we didn't have time. One of them, you're going to hate me. No. One of them, you're going to look at that and say, well, this is a little different, but the old man asked us to do it, so we'll do it, all right? And I saved a handout so you can take them home and do some work. So, if you don't put the boundaries, decide what you're going to do, and some of you long ways in your marriage, everybody else will decide that for you. So I challenge every couple somewhere, as soon as possible, decide what your marriage is going to be. And you say, wow, we've been in it a long time. Well, define it then so that your grandkids could have this, so that your kids can have it. And I call it our marriage creed. You decide what you want to write here. And this is what we wrote, and you get a copy. Don't copy ours, okay? This is your homework. Don't do it like you did at school. Do your own. You can use this as a jumping spot. So, and we put scripture with each of them. All right? I won't read all of them, but I'll just give you a start. You'll have the whole copy. We proclaim and commit that our individual and joint relationships with our God is our number one priority, and we seek to love him with all of our heart, with all of our soul, with all of our mind. Matthew 22, 37 through 38. We proclaim and commit that our love, service, care, and adoration for each other is our number two priority and will supersede all other human relationships. Genesis 2:24, Matthew 19:5, Mark 10:5, Ephesians 5:31. We proclaim and commit that we will always speak positively to and about each other and never belittle one another at any time in private or publicly. That's what we proclaim. We've agreed to that. And even my worst days, my dysfunction in our early part of our marriage, I can tell you that she never spoke negatively to our kids or anyone else. She had a full bank of ammunition to do it if she wanted to. But she committed to God that she would never do that, and she never has. Sometimes I get criticized because I brag too much on my wife in public. But man, I could go on. You think I got started? I can go on for hours. You cut me off. Always speak positively. When I see people talking and I see them in those little conversations, snide remarks in a Bible study group or a home group or a party, cut each other down or he cut her down, boy, I want to pull him aside and slap him in the head and say, dude, you're an idiot. And talk to him and help him. We proclaim and commit that forgiveness will be automatic as Christ forgave us. We don't have a choice. And one of the things we have to deal with a lot of time is forgiveness. The wife won't forgive him or he won't forgive. Hey, as a Christian, we don't have a choice if we're going to follow him, and we help people with forgiveness. We proclaim and commit that we will treat each other with gentleness, meekness, and kindness. And again, this is nothing to do with me. It's all to do with her. We have never yelled at each other in our whole marriage. Not once. Our kids will testify to that. And the reason why, I can't get her to pick a fight with me. She just won't do it. But that's a commitment we made. We proclaim and we commit that we will express gratitude to each other daily, because a grateful heart is a humble and loving heart. I am not a grateful person by nature, my sinful nature. I think Billy is a grateful. God put gratefulness in her. I can bring her home one rose, and you think I bought the whole flower shop. Say, oh, you bought me a rose. I'm thinking, boy, that was a cheap way. $250 for a rose, and I got gratitude. And she'll think that. I found out years ago she loves cantaloupe. When I bring a cantaloupe home, it's like I brought home a new car. She said, wow, a cantaloupe? Yeah. Gratitude. We proclaim and commit that we will nourish a deep love and respect for each other, and we will build needed significance and security. Ephesians, the verses we've just shared. We proclaim and commit that we will be generous to God and trust him for our provisions and our care. That's one of our values. And our kids have always thought, man, you're going to give everything away. That's just a value we had, that we want to be generous. Why? Because if we're generous people, God's a generous God, and I'm not talking prosperity theology. I just know that that's his heart, so we want to be the same way. And it puts a great example for our kids, how they should live. We proclaim and commit that we will pursue a deep, active life of intimacy together and will not defile our marriage. And if you don't know what I was talking about there, I'll just put it down, you understand it. We were talking about sex, okay? Intimacy. And it's more than a physical act. It's everything that comes to that, okay? We proclaim that. We proclaim and commit that our marriage will be a picture of Christ in the church and will live and order our lives to honor him above all else. All right? Dennis and Billy. You need to you say, well, we're so far. Hey, do it for your kids. Do it for your grandkids. Pass it on to them. Make it really nice. Maybe put it up in a picture frame around your house so when your kids walk in, they have something to think about your proclamation of why Grandma and Grandpa have been married 56 years or whatever it is for you. Okay? That's your first homework assignment. I give you this as an example. You'll get that when you leave. All right? Give you 2 more pieces for homework, and you can walk out of here and do nothing with it, and then you've missed half the course, or you can walk out of here and say, we're going to take this serious and spend the next day or 2 just kind of working on this. All right? This is a good discussion. Each of you will get this. You'll get one, and I would suggest maybe tomorrow afternoon sometime, each of you take it, you go to a separate part of the house, and you look at it, and you start making notes, what you see about this house that's wrong. Okay? And when you look at it, it'll make sense. If you look closely, and the longer you look at it, the more you'll see that's wrong with this house. And they indicate something that could be in your marriage. You might look at it together. Of course, we see this mallet up here, and we see this chisel, and if you can see it, it's caused a great division in the house. So that's your number one major thing. What is that one thing that causes this house to start to split? And then what are the pressures that's driving that? Okay? And I don't know what it'll be with you, but if there is, let's talk about it. Then if you keep looking closer, you're going to see other things. And I'm going to tell you all, but I can look at it because I've looked at it many times, and I can identify 8 or 9 things that I see wrong with this house. And each of those things you identify will be some type of symbolism in your marriage, possibly. Or maybe you got it under, but maybe it's there, and you say, this has been there for many years. We need to talk about it. For instance, I'll give you one example. You look at it, and you say, I can see some things. But for instance, this door, there's something missing on it. And when you look at it, and you figure out what's missing on it, it will reveal a lot about maybe that's missing in our lives too. All right? Does that make... I don't want to give it away. We give this, and when we do counseling with our couples, that's one of their take-home. Then we come back next week, and we talk about it. All right, here's the third one. And we leave on this high note. The guys are going to be all excited, maybe, or not. It's called an intimacy inventory. You say, hold it just a minute now, man. Look, we've been married. I don't care how long you've been married. If you've never done something like this, you might be time to do it. Okay? Because there might be a lot of frustration and stuff you never talk about. And I ask couples, do you ever talk about these things? Well, we never do. I said, why? Well, we talk about it. And so you're each going to have one, and you're going to fill out this inventory separate from each other, okay? And then you're going to talk about it some night. And then maybe read Song of Solomon. That's a great book to read. On a scale of 1 to 10, rate your sex life today. All right? See, and you go do this separate, all right? 1 to 10. Somebody say, I'm already uncomfortable. It's going to get worse. Do you consider sex to be sacred, shameful, or a gift from God, or a curse, or a duty? Why? How important is sex in your marriage? All right, here's the fun part now, all right? What metaphor most fits your sex life and why? All right, I'll give you a couple examples. Create your own, but I'll give you a couple examples. Here they are. It's a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Simple and tasty. It's an ice cream cone on a hot day. Yummy and messy. It's a thorn bush. Painful. It's an armadillo. Hard on the outside, but soft on the inside. It's the Dead Sea. No life at all. It's Obamacare. Free for the most part, but cost me something too much later. It's prime rib. Couldn't be better. It's porcupine. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. All right? Think of your own metaphor. You say, this is crazy. Think of your own metaphor together and then talk about it. You say, why? Because I have found out that sex is one of the most frustrating things in a marriage, and it should be one of the most enjoyable things. And the reason why, because they never talk about it, they never discuss it. They just sleep on the edge of the bed. I've almost fallen off the edge of bed many times, back in the early days. And you ever do that, guys? You just, turn your back. All right, I'm going to bed. You almost fall off. You ready? What song best exemplifies your sex life? Think about that. Wild thing, you make my heart sing. I don't know what is it? Pick a song and discuss that together. If you tell your mate one thing, what would be the one thing you tell your mate that would improve your sex life? What would it be? You want to keep reading? But anyway, there's a bunch here. Do you consider your da-da-da? What is needed? How often? What is the way of communication that you want to have sex tonight? There's a lot of ways you can communicate that where you don't have to say, well, we're going to do it tonight or not. Well, communicate. No, you shouldn't even have to ask the question. The candle's lit, the music's playing, the bathtub's going. I don't know whatever it is, your signals. And then here's the biggest one. Describe your ideal, enjoyable night of intimacy. What's that like? She knows by now. All right? I know by now. I didn't know for a long time. So you say, I don't even want to come back to this class. Well, I'm trying to help you in every arena, spiritually first, and then this practical thing. So we're going to hand these out to everybody. Where's my hander-outers? Want everybody get that's your take-home. Here's your other take-home. There we go, and then we get the marriage creed. One more. Yeah, good. All right, everybody. That's free. It doesn't cost you anything today. All right, right here, Bargain City, and I won't add to the cost of anything. Now, either you're sitting here saying, this is crazy, or you're sitting here saying, boy, we've needed this. Or you might be saying, this is this refresh, make sure we're still tuned up. Every marriage needs a tune-up, no matter how far, all right? No matter how old. And probably you all saying, now, how old are you people? How old do you think we are? Anybody want to take a guess? Give me a guess. We already told them? I didn't tell them. You might have told them. All right. We're young. We're 75. How's that? Okay? You saying you've been married? Yeah, we got married 2 weeks out of high school. That's crazy, isn't it? James Dobson hadn't even been out of college yet, I don't think. There wasn't a thing written that I know on marriage or family in those days. Folks on the family didn't exist. We walked into marriage totally ignorant, with no premarital counseling. 2 days after married, moved 900 miles away from home to go to college. There was no cell phones, no email, no contact with mom and dad, no money from them. We paid our own way through college, graduate school, doctorate program, and the best thing that ever happened to us. Because we learned to depend upon each other and God to a lot of that. But in that, learned a lot of mistakes too, on my part. So that's our story. Can you believe that? 2 weeks out of high school. I'd kill my kids if they'd ever think about that today. But different times, different areas. But God told me, I knew at 13 that I was going to be in the ministry. Never doubted that since I was 13. And preached my first sermon when I was 13. It was the biggest mess you ever heard. But and he's got my book, so he gets to read about it. It's in there. Tell me about how I preached my first sermon at 13. And the backstory real quick, because I got, I'm 3 minutes over. Because of my way I grew up, I stuttered badly. When everybody else got finished with lunch in the early elementary grades, I went to speech therapy. I wouldn't get up in front of anybody. I just stuttered badly. And so when I talked to my pastor at a little Baptist church, I said, boy, I like to really serve God. And, my folks that got saved, it was so radical. And he said, maybe God's calling you to preach. They always kind of suggest that. And so we prayed, and I thought, well, maybe I'd love to do that. I'd love to tell people about Jesus all my life. So we had this little Saturday night youth rally. Every Saturday night in this little church we had, they'd meet in the back room. We'd have a youth rally of probably 20 kids. And so one night, one week, he said, you're going to preach next Saturday at the youth rally. And I almost, passed out when he said that. He said, well, if God's called you to preach, find out. You get to preach. And I said, I didn't. And man, I'm starting worse than ever. And I remember my mom took me down to Robert Hall, which some of you don't know that. It was kind of like the low discount men's warehouse. And I got my first little suit and tie. And I remember that first, when we went and had, we sung our little choruses, Christ for Me, and whatever it was that we sang in those days, in a little chorus book. And somebody did a little skit or something. Then it was time for me to preach. And I'm sitting on the front row with that tie. I felt like I was getting choked. I had a tie on. And I'll never forget, I thought, I'm going to die. It's not going to happen. I don't know why we're doing it. I'm thinking, this is the worst thing. I'm going to embarrass. They're going to laugh at me. And then the preacher said, all right. And he called me Denny. Denny, you come on up. And I got up, and he'd given me a little help on the message. And I read the passage, started talking. And probably 5-10 minutes into it, I realized I'm not stuttering. I'd never stuttered again in my life. I don't know what that was. If Benny Hinn would have been around, it'd been a miracle. I don't know. Maybe it was a miracle. But I stepped into what God called me to do, and I've never stuttered in my life since then. And all of a sudden, I only preached 10 minutes. That was about it. But I realized something changed that day. And so, here we are, loving every minute, enjoying, getting the privilege, especially at this age, getting to do what we do. But that answered all your questions. Let's go to lunch. Huh? Your turn. Okay.
Thank you, Brother Dennis. And Miss Billy, thank y'all for leading us today and last night. And they will, everybody who's not serving in one of the kids ministry classes or grow groups or student ministry grow groups or preschool tomorrow morning, all of our grow groups will meet in the CLC in the gym in the morning, all of our adult grow group classes. So Brother Dennis will be sharing and teaching there again as well. So if you have any questions that you didn't ask today, tomorrow morning will be another opportunity to do that. And I know he'll be glad to stay here and talk as well for now. So so it's noon 05. You are free to go see a Razorback basketball game if you so please. Go take a nap before the other game, or do what our fearless leader asks us to do and go home and put ourselves under a microscope. Thank y'all so much for being here. Thanks to our guys who have been serving in the booths today and making sure all of this stuff was working, and just so thank you for everybody. Okay. I'm going to ask Mark, would you mind closing us in a word of prayer? Amen. Bless y'all. Have a good afternoon.